Welcome everyone to this evening's Dhamma sharing. Now this I believe is this speaker's first public sermon, Dhamma sermon here at the Buddhist Maha Vihara. Even though Bhante Mahinda, Professor Mahinda has come here before, he hasn't given us an opportunity, we didn't have an opportunity to have a public sermon. So this year for Vesak we decided to invite him from his busy schedule in the UK to come and join us and share his knowledge. As you know, he's a very serious academic, right? When I read his profile, you'll find out why. Bhante Prof Deegalle Mahinda is a professorial research associate at the School of Oriental and Asian Studies at the University of London. He's also a professor emeritus at for the study of religions, philosophies and ethics at the Bath Spa University in UK. He was also a visiting scholar at the Faculty of Divinity at the University of Cambridge. Professor Deegalle is a graduate of Harvard University, the University of Chicago, the University of Pasadena. He has held numata visit professorships at the Buddhist Studies at McGill University in Canada and NEH professorships in humanities at the Colgate University in the US. That's only in the western part, now in the eastern part. He has also conducted postdoctorate research at Kyoto University, Aichi Gakuin University, and the International College for Postgraduate Buddhist Studies in Japan under the auspices of the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science and the Bukkyo Dendo Koikai. I hope I got that right. That's a mouthful already. There's a lot more, but I'm not going to read all those. Bhante is a prolific writer. Okay, he's authored many books. He's got a lot of reference material online, journals. He's also the former editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Buddhist and Christian Studies. On top of all that, he's also a media celebrity. He has appeared on BBC One, on The Big Questions, BBC World Service, Al Jazeera, and Buddhist TV programs. He's conducted fieldwork in Sri Lanka, Japan, Korea, and China. His research concentrates on ethics of war and violence, minority issues, and minority issues in pluralist society, religious extremism, Buddhism, and politics. He's into interreligious dialogue, religious conversions, asceticism in Japan, Buddhism in the West, pilgrimage and Buddhist rituals, preaching traditions, Tripitaka translations, and palm leaf manuscript collections in South and Southeast Asia. Now we know why he's so busy. It's because it's never-ending work. Even now, while he's in his room, he's always working, constantly working. When he comes down for his meals, you don't see him during the daytime, sitting outside and chatting with anyone. He's always working. So we are very honored, Bhante, to have you here this evening to share with us on this topic, on the Aggañña Sutta. I think many of you have heard of the sutta. And Bhante talks about beginnings, kingship, and morality. Bhante?
Thank you very much. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dhamma savana kalu ayang bhadanta. Dhamma savana kalu ayang bhadanta. Dhamma savana kalu ayang bhadanta. We have a venerable member here, dear friends in Dhamma. First of all, I must thank to Mr. Leslie Jayawardena, because this would not have been possible without his initiation. Right after I left last year in September, he got got back to me and say that, oh, you must come and reserve the flight. And so it was perhaps the flight I have ever booked in advance, so advanced, several months ago. So thank you very much for inviting me and accommodating me. And my stay here last year has been very fruitful, and also this year. Thank you very much for generosity of the Sasana Abhivardhana Society and its members and the place. I very much appreciated. Now, today's topic, I'm going to talk about Aggañña Sutta. The topic is obvious, and I kind of title it as the beginnings, kinship, and morality. And now, I like to have in the form of discussion, but because of the content, I may be not be able to do it fully. However, if you, while I'm talking, if you have a problem, you can raise the hands and we can stop and go slowly. And now, the lecture series is titled as Buddhist Social and Political Philosophy. So these 3 lectures, today and next 2 Sundays, they are kind of related. So if I don't do everything today, we can pick them up next week when we do it. And now, this sutta, Aggañña Sutta, it will be clear when we get into it, but it has a very interesting aspects, and that's why I picked it up to discuss it. And it's found in the longer discourses of the canon, and so the Digha Nikaya. So it's a very, very valuable one. So today's purpose for us, we wanted to understand the foundations of the Buddhist social and political philosophy. And now here, people who are not familiar, of course, Buddhism is considered philosophy, but in particular, I am interested in the relevance of Buddhist teaching for the society and politics. And so here, society means social institutions, politics means like state and the governance and statecraft. Yeah. So, basically, all 3 lectures aim to introduce some aspects of it, and here there is value in this. We want to appreciate the value and especially relevance of Buddhist scriptures for contemporary world, because some people think that Buddhism has less relevance to the modern world, which is not true. There are discourses, and Buddha was concerned about the issues at the time, like, say, for example, war. We think today is the corrupted world and war, but the Buddha's time also there were war and violence. So now here, in this discourse, we will get into some of the key aspects of which are relevant for today. And then here, most important thing is the analysis that Buddha employed in these discourses are extraordinary, and they are influential in shaping what we call Buddhist thought or Buddhist philosophy, and that actually requires our attention to them. And here, I will give you briefly those 3 discourses that I plan to talk about in the coming 2 occasions. And of course, I already mentioned that they are in the Digha Nikaya, and here issues that they concern are poverty, crime, caste discrimination. Those are the key issues they deal with. Now, of course, poverty is a serious problem all over the world. Like, after COVID, for example, all around the world, the people have become poorer in all levels, and also the poverty level has gone up in various countries. But these are not new issues. Even in Buddha's time, they were common. And so we will, next week, on next Sunday, we will talk about more poverty, but today we will talk about more about caste or class. Yeah, so that's the first discourse we call Aggañña Sutta. Now here, Aggañña means like Genesis or the beginning. Now we have to remember something that Buddha was always says the samsara has no beginning and samsara has no end. You know, kind of, the world has no beginning and world has no end. So the Buddha always discouraged his disciples not to ask the question, not to explore it, because Buddha saw that dwelling on this question about the beginning of the world is meaningless. However, here, because of a specific reason, because of the issues concerned about Brahmanism, Buddha was forced to give a little bit about the beginning. So he was not interested in the Genesis, but nevertheless, beginning things appear in this discourse. So in that respect, this discourse is very valuable. And next 2 weeks, we will talk about the Cakkavattī Siyanāda Sutta and the Kūtadanta Sutta. Now, am I too fast for you, or I'm speaking too fast, no? Everybody can follow, yeah? Okay, wonderful. So now Cakkavattī Siyanāda Sutta is a lion's discourse, or discourse on the lion's roar of wheel-turning monarch. Now there, clearly, it's about the ruler or the person who ruled the country. So it's a kind of it's relevance for politics. And then the third one, Kūtadanta Sutta, is very important because it talks about economic planning, you know, kind of addressing social issues using a plan. Now, of course, when we think about economic planning, we think about communist governments, you know, socialist governments. But here you could see some aspects which much come closer to some of the ideologies maintained by socialist government. And also you could see some of the ideas that come up here. You see critique of capitalism also, you know. You see that it's quite interesting to take these all three as a one package and explore its relevance to the modern world. And so we should not use the word unique because it looks like a more rhetoric, but indeed this sutta is unique because it talks about the beginning, you know, beginning of things. Now, this is the citation for people who wanted to look up in electronically. This is a D means Digha Nikaya, volume 3, page 77 onward. And also people who are interested in Pali, you know, I knew some people are very much interested in Pali. I gave some of the quotations here for 10 points, and you don't have to write them down, but if you're interested in, you can use them, and I will refer to them from time to time. Yeah? So now this sutta, the Aggañña Sutta, is very important because of its critical part of it, or critical apparatus in it. And here, Buddha appears very radical, very revolutionary. And also, sometimes you can see that actually Buddha is using even today what we call offensive language in some ways in this discourse, because he was criticizing the stuff came from the earlier. So it's interesting, some of these, you know, if you read these Pali, you see some of the underlying words, you know, kind of see this kind of sexuality-related language is used, you know, kind of Buddha did not use diplomatic language. He was straight to the point, you know, kind of very unusual in that way. So he did not try to cover it up or hide, and used a lot of humor, you know, kind of he responded to the question with a lot of humor. Shaming the opponents, you know, kind of saying, you know, what you say this, but actually it is this, you know, kind of like that, you know, quite interesting. So that critical apparatus is a quite fascinating part. And also, even though it's not explicit, there's a strong, unusual doctrinal content in it. Especially this one, even though it's not specified, anicca. Anicca we translate it as not permanent or impermanence. And now I think this is the Buddha's unique contribution to the world. Of course, apart mind, understanding of the mind, the distinct contribution that Buddhism makes is impermanence. That things are in a constant flux. Or change in its shapes, and you can see it in Aggañña Sutta is very clearly, and so that's without these concepts, probably he couldn't use this critical explanation in this sutta. So the impermanence is the guiding principle there, and so broadly, even though there are other issues, but here in this, as a discourse, it talks about the origin of the world, or myth about the origin of the world, and the formation of the state or ruler and kinship, and the social institutions like marriage, family, and things like that. How these institution classes came into being, and that this is the content. And then from modern scientific point of view, like evolution and the kind of research about black hole theory, kind of all this scientific theory. Probably some of you are more familiar with it. From that point of view, also this has a merit as a scientific document. Kind of an explanation of the change in the world, and also interesting. Because we tend to criticize Karl Marx in particular, in terms of his emphasis on materiality. And you can see the Buddha also has used that argument. So people who can compare with Marxism and socialism, you can also use this scripture to some extent, what Buddhists wanted to express. And in this discourse, it's very clear, materiality or the material things have a significant impact in changing the human lives, both mind, kind of. So this is also a very important contribution. So we tend to ignore the money, economics, and the material things often. But here it's very clearly the material things are the ones which change our life and transform social institutions. So in that way, the evolutionary development is there, and it's very valuable insight in the discourse. And now, why I choose this one, not because I am interested in caste or the class, but because of its critique of what I call Brahmanic hegemony. I don't know whether you know this word. Hegemony, like could say like oppressive, dominant narrative, or postmodernists would call it meta-narrative. Kind of the like theory of evolution is a meta-narrative. And Brahmanic hegemony also a meta-narrative. That's the guiding principle that shaped the India, what we call India, Indian subcontinent. And now in this sutta, there's a critique, serious critique, and shamelessly actually, very strong critique of the cultural norm, and that makes the Buddha a rebel. Kind of revolutionary, and kind of refusing what he inherited as, if you use the word Indian. Of course, the word did not exist at that time, but if you use the Indian, he looks like more anti-Indian in some ways in his analysis, especially when it comes to kinship and so on. So the caste is an important key item in his challenge in this hegemonic narrative that Buddha refuses, very clearly. And so it's less likely that we have any other scripture like this. So this is, in that way, it's a very special one. So now, before moving further, to give you a little bit flavor, I want to give you a little bit about content. How many of you have read this sutta in original, in Pali, Sinhalese, or in English? Anybody? Amazing. Wow. So that means all are meditators. Yeah? All are meditators. And yeah, meditators. Yeah. I'm sorry I should have, but if you need to look at them for the other ones next time, you can actually Google them. You can find the text very easily. But it's good that you are not familiar with the text. That means my presentation has more value because I am not talking something that you're familiar. Yeah? So nobody has read it. Wow, this is one person, okay, 2 people. Huh? Oh, the other one?
Yes.
Yeah. So 2 people have read it. Okay, wonderful. But if you have read it, you are in familiar ground, and then you may want to look at those slides there. But people who have not the text, they may not make any meaning, because they're all technical terms. But the slides will be helpful for you. Okay. Now, before moving into detail, I want to give you a brief about what the content is, and these are all in Pali. And I'm going to kind of identify them. There's a preamble. Preamble is concerning about the caste, especially Brahmin says that we are the best. That's. I think it should be mentioned here. I think Brahmano Setto. Kind of the third line there. So that's the word used, and that's the kind of the preamble. And then this is the kind of the key first point. It's about racial or ethnic purity, or purity associated with your birth. So basically the 4 castes, and in particular, one particular caste taken as the best. Yeah. So purity related with your birth, and then the second point talks about how the world evolved, and here taste, rasa. Kind of the material that they eat in, and the sweet stuff, and how it changed the life. And then the third part, I will go into all of these here, because then it's easy for me to briefly explain them. Like, say, after that you can see the sun, earth, creeper, rise. And now here what you get is, at that time there was no sun and moon were born, and then stuff appeared on earth, and the creepers, and then it disappeared, and then rice came. So there's a critical period there. When the rice appeared, civilization became a little bit more. And then, until then, there's no sexual distinction. There's no between male and female distinction. And so the third stage, the sexual differentiation comes. And then fourth one, family life, sexual relations, come into effect. And then you divide your eyes, you start making boundaries, you kind of have your own plot of land, and that seems to be creating chaos. That's where really problems start, and that requires appointing a king. It's called Mahasammat, kind of, this is where the state begins, And then next section goes to this is where actually the focus from 6, 7, 8, those 3, 4 are the focus, because that Buddha basically going against the Brahmanic narrative, and Buddha mentions, actually Buddha redefine. Of course, in the Brahmanic Vedic text, these castes are defined, but Buddha kind of turned them upside down, and he has a different definition of it, and that definition is given. And then 9 is quite one. Important one, duscharita, or the good and bad and vices come into effect. And then the last one, kind of more awakening morals. So here, basically, these numbers taken from the Buddha Jayanti Tripitaka in Sri Lanka. So the numbers do not match with the PTS one, but it doesn't matter. But basically, you can see where the discourse moves, kind of caste, and then a primary stage of evolution in the world, the food, and how the food changed the lives and so on. So now I have given you, yes? The previous one, or? Okay. Yeah. So this one is only a brief because it's new. I thought is to give you an idea, and one of the key points that you want to take today, from this is Buddha defines the caste. Buddha says actually how it is understood is different, and its distortion is not real. I am going to interpret it this way, and this is the way it should be. So basically, turning the tables down, up, down, so complete rejecting of the Brahmanic narrative. And so now we will go little by little. Now here, I want to go to the context. What is the context for this sutta? It is interesting. If you look at it there on the top, you will see Vasetta and Bharadwaja. Buddha was living in Savatthi and in Pubbārāma. At that time, Buddha had two trainees. Two trainees came to the Buddha, and they were undergoing probationary period. That means they were getting initial training. But they were Brahmins. Two Brahmins, Vasetta and Bharadwaja. And when they came to Buddhism, and Buddha says, you are Brahmins, what your fellow other Brahmins talk about you, what do they tell you to? And they say that they actually abuse us, they blame us, and they say that we were the best caste, and you went down the drain, you became, you choose the worst caste, because you renounce being a Brahmin. So that's the context. Now, Buddha did not here, at least in this context, Buddha did not want to tell about the beginning of the world, but he wanted to refuse this abuse, this hegemonic narrative, and that's why he kind of find opportunity to give a little bit detail about the situation. Now, it is interesting. There's a serious criticism of Brahmanic belief, but the people who the reason for that discourse are the two Brahmins themselves. Two Brahmins of themselves who were trying to be Buddhist monks. Yeah. So it's a quite interesting context there. So here the Buddha was staying in the Savatthi, and then two Brahmin Vasita, and they were, we wanted to become bhikkhus. This is the statement that the blame that say only a Brahmin is of the best social grade, other grades are low. So that's the hegemonic narrative, yeah? So which is called Brahmanic hegemony. So this is actually, I think it is still in operation in India. And I think if you think about the situation, of course after Modi, probably Dalit situation got a little bit better. But, and of course, Ambedkar, in 1950s. Of course, we know that there was always friction with Gandhi and Ambedkar because they did not get along. Of course, people know about Ambedkar? Yeah, people know, yeah? Because he come from not from the four castes, but even the lowest caste. And then the story says that he could not go to school, and he sat outside the walls of the school and learned. And then he goes to Columbia University, and then got a barrister. And I think he was in London also. He come back, and he's the one who wrote the Indian Constitution. And that's why Indian Constitution is very much secular. And then he was testing all the religions. In 1956, he, with 5 million Dalit people, he became a Buddhist. And that's the kind of modern period where, because Buddhism disappeared almost from 13th century onward, with the Mughal invasions and so on, and of course there are other reasons also. But then 20th century again, Buddhism, of course, Dalai Lama comes in 1959, and Ambedkar become, of course he was experimenting with Christianity and Islam, and he thought that the best option would be Buddhism. So this Dalit, they are outside the caste, they were oppressed, and their situation got better after 1950s onward. And I think from the last few years with Modi, I think he has empowered these classes. I think that's what I heard, but I don't have because actually this is one of the problems for India even today, because if you think about China and India, China doesn't have this obstacle like that, but this class or caste distinction is obstacle for India's development. I think India would flourish better if it didn't have this class distinction, which is just my observation. You don't have to take it as the truth, but my observation, yeah? So this kind of thing. And then Buddha says, that's not true. What they say is not true. What happened is these Brahmins have forgotten the real story, and Buddha starts criticizing, and that's where things get kind of notices, and then this is where he criticized very clearly, and we say, on the contrary, Brahmanis, the female wives of Brahmins, are known to be fertile, seen to be with child, and so on. You can see this. I have kind of underlined utu on the number 2, I think third line. I cannot see it well from this angle, and this is the word that Buddha used. And there, Buddha did not hide what he wanted to say, because these are sexual language actually. So you won't say it in public. Sometimes we, in Asian cultures, a little bit, in Japanese we would say hasukashi, kind of a little bit, embarrassed to state it in public. But Buddha, kind of clearly say it in without any filtering. So very clearly, and this is again, and what you're saying is true. I'm going to explain a little bit later on this, because I have the original text and I will show it to you. So now I move into this idea of beginning. Now there are different views on the origin of the state in ancient India. 2 belong to pre-Buddhist tradition, and this is one tradition is the Brahmanic tradition, other one is a Jaina one. The third one is the early Buddhist one, Theravada Buddhist tradition. So the earliest account in that context in Theravada is the Aggañña Sutta. So now they are a powerful critique of caste or class or status. All three, we can take it as something similar in any society. Now, caste can be a problem. It's a problem. It could be a serious issue for empowering or developing nations, or for improving the material conditions. Like, for example, Japan developed so quickly after the World War II because they didn't have a class or caste. Because they were crushed to the ground, but they were able to rise up as one nation. And this may not be the same in many other countries. It would, because of this lack of equality. So caste system imposed by Brahmanic hegemony can be seen as the gravest social problem of harm. And here, I use the word harm in the sense of violence. Here, violence in the sense of denying the human rights. Like, for example, UN Charter will say that any human being, any human child, if they are schooling age, should be able to go to school, for example. It's a fundamental right, yeah? So the caste may operate in a situation that you may deny that right to a human being, yeah? So it could work as a deterrent for prosperity, yeah. So it's not just a label status, but it has harmful consequences. So Buddha rejected static definition of social state of human being. One person is higher at the birth, or other person is lower at the birth. Buddha rejected it. And from the Buddhist point of view, of course, we know that Sri Lanka, for example, have adopted some sense of caste, which is quite contrary to the Buddhist teaching. Buddha basically, of course, it's the influence of India, I guess, but anyway. So equality is very important, irrespective of birth. And now, how Buddha protested this hegemonic narrative is his community that he introduced, Sangha. Sangha means collection. Coming together many groups, and once they renounce all previous identities. They are reborn as a new person, so they become casteless. So this is the one actually bothered when they were accused in Vasetta and Bharadwaja. So here, what you see is that observable data or empirical examples Buddha used to counter the argument, and he questioned the very foundation of Vedic hegemonic interpretation. His explanation was caste, what was in India, was a gradual development in Indian society on the physical and occupational factors rather than divinely ordained creation. This last two lines are important. So Buddha's interpretation highlighted gradual development of caste in Indian society. So it is not by birth, but because of the professions, professional, that develop into caste. And also physical and occupational factors, kind of jobs that you do shape your location, rather than they are divinely ordained, as the text suggests. Now, in the Indian context, caste is a divine thing, so you cannot mess with it. So you cannot, like for example, if you're Brahmin, you're not supposed to marry somebody in the Sudra class, for example. You cannot move, because it's going against the God. So this four caste, this text is important. If you are not familiar with Indian context, you may want to read it, but I got some excerpts for you here in this slide. This is very important. This is a creation story in the Indian tradition, hymn of man. And in Sanskrit called Purusa Sukta. It's come from one of the oldest forms of Indian literature, Rig Veda, the most sacred literature. And this story found on the creation of the world. And these some of the, even though it's not strictly or directly related to the topic, but I thought we should, because it's the background that Buddha was opposing, and so it's better to understand what the Indian situation was. Now, this creationist story, say, 1,000 heads has Purusa. Purusa is actually literally means man. 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet, on every side furrowed in earth, he fills a space 10 fingers wide. This Purusa is all that yet hath been and all that is to be. That means that's the reality. What was in the past is Purusa. What will become in the future is also Purusa. Yeah? And all creatures are 1/4 of him. 1/4. And 3/4 are eternal life in heaven. So it's like only a tiny bit in this world. You can see some resemblance to incarnation in the Christianity also, reincarnated, something similar there, yeah? So it's quite interesting. With 3/4 Purusa went up, 1/4 of him again was here. And from him Vraj was born, again Purusa from Vraj was born. As soon as he was born, he spread eastward and westward over the earth. When goats prepared the sacrifice with Purusa as the offering, its oil was spring, and the holy gift was autumn, and the summer was wood. So kind of, if people are not familiar with the Indian Hindu tradition, sacrifice is the most crucial one. Sacrifice is the essential way of pleasing the gods. Yeah, and now you can see even the sacrifice, Buddha changed it. What we call dana or feeding the monk is the option that Buddha converted it, changed it, rather than sacrifice it, support the monks, a monastic community. I'm not time to go into it, but this is how he twisted it. From that great general sacrifice, the dripping fat was gathered up. He formed the creature of the air and animals both wild and tame. From it were horses born, from it all cattle, goats and sheep were born. When they divided Purusa, how many portions did they make? This is the important point, 11. Yeah? What do they call his mouth, his arms? What do they call his thighs and feet? And then the answer comes. The Brahmin was his mouth. So that means from Purusa's mouth, Brahmin was born. And from his both arms, the Rajanya made. Here Rajanya refers to kin, but basically warriors, Sastriyas. And this is the caste that Buddha himself belonged. Yeah? Buddha himself was belonged to Rajanya because he was a warrior, the ruler. Yeah? So he was basically born his armed Purusas. Yeah? And his thighs became the Vaishya. Vaishya is usually the word for traders, yeah, merchant class. And from his feet, the Sudra was produced. Now, Sudra, we call it sometimes untouchable. Yeah? So this is one, and it was an occupational term, people who sweep the streets and scavengers and deal with dead bodies and things like that. Those professions, they were called because, see, this kind of mapping according to the parts of the body. And the higher you are in the body, you are superior. So because, and also this kind of symbolism is interesting. Brahmin as the mouth of Purusha. The reason is their role. The Brahmins has a role to recite text, recite the sacred text, because they are basically, you can hear even the next temple, I just heard the Vedic recitation in the few hours ago. And so because they use the mouth for recite the text, and perhaps that may be the reason, perhaps the mouth was associated, but this hierarchical allocation would criticize very much. And so these kind of the background that Buddha was opposing, yeah? And then there are other stories here, kind of the moon was gendered from his mind and so on. I'm not going to do this because we are limited time, but you got the point. The sacred scripture assigns where these four races come. Yeah, they were created. They were divinely created roles. Now, Buddha's critique, Buddha rejected traditional caste discrimination in India. He highlighted gradual differentiation. This is a very important word. Gradual differentiation of people. So the people were formed into various classes, so on, kind of as a result of economic factors, as a result of material factors, and not because of they were created. So they were equal to one another in earlier time, yeah? So kind of basically, Buddha saying it's like just a myth. What they're saying is a myth or story, make up invented story rather than the real. So the Aggañña's critique, the four classes that I'm not going to go in detail, but these are the ones that we mentioned already, yeah? And if you want to know more, you can go to this section, four classes. This is Muller's translation, Sacred Books of the East, yeah? And now, this part, I will skip it because, there is an important point, but because we are running out of time, we may not say, but this word, both bad and good qualities, this emphasis is very important because today the part of the talk is about morals. See, this is the good distinction of good and bad serves as the key part of this discourse. The Buddha says as the important part of it. Actually, your class depends on how much good you have in your life and how much bad you have in your life. So the more bad you are, you are lower, more good you have is higher. That's how the Buddhism weighs it down. And now this is also interesting here, that in virtue of a norm, and not irrespective of norm. So here, norm is translated Dhamma. In this translation, norm is used Dhamma. So Dhamma as the criteria. So the good behavior, good understanding as the key. Yeah, maybe I will skip this, but this is a kind of the discussion that say that even kin, Pashenadi, was actually the Buddha's kingdom. Kapilavatthu belonged to him. But, so Buddha is supposed to pay homage to him. But nevertheless, Kin Pashenadi always come and pay respect to the Buddha. And this is where actually the respect of the monks comes to. Like for example, today in countries like Sri Lanka and Thailand, even the royalty will venerate the monks. Of course, it has Asokas also, the same idea. Because idea is that, they have a norm, they have a higher way of life, their lives are led by the Dhamma. Because of that, the kin bow down. That's one of the arguments that Buddha makes there. But we are not going to go into detail. And then this is the answer that he tells the Vasit and Bharajwa. This is what you said. I am a veritable son of the Exalted One. Exalted One means the Buddha. Born from his mouth, born from the norm. Here, norm means Dhamma. Born of the Dhamma, created by the norm, created by the Dhamma, hair of norm. And so basically say, it's the same wording that Brahmins used earlier, twisted and transformed and said actually, I am a son of the Buddha and I have gone beyond it, yeah? So it's a very interesting one. So here, so far what I have done, I say that using the Purusha Sukta, there was a kind of social hierarchy introduced in India on the basis of birth. And that birth is created as a divine creation, and Buddha was protesting to it. Buddha was saying, refusing it. Yeah. So from the Buddha's point of view, everybody is equal, and if they differ according to good and bad they have, and Dhamma in their lives. Yeah. So it's a spiritual criteria from the Buddhist point of view. Kind of conduct. Is very important. Your day-to-day running of your life is more important than your parents or where you were born. Yeah? So it's very, very similar to the way the Americans think today. Or, kind of like that, no matter where you come from, as long as you can make money, you're great. Yeah? So now the origin, origin here Buddha presented not to just talk about origins, but to explain the Brahmins are fools. Brahmins are inventing things. Brahmins are not speaking the truth. They have forgotten the real thing. That's what that. And then he goes back and kind of going to like a recorder. Kind of rewind them back and play back. Kind of that's what's happening. And then it's a long story. And say that there comes a time after lapse of a long period, this world passes away. So that means what it means, I think I put it there. Basically here the idea is nothing remains permanent. The environment change and the human beings change, and as a result, the world moves. And this is the impermanence. When this happens, beings have mostly been reborn in the world of radiance, and there they dwell, made of mind, feeding on rapture, self-luminous. When sooner or later this world begins to revolve, beings who had deceased from the world of radiance usually come to life as humans. So I wonder, when the population increased today in the world, people always ask, are the mosquitoes reborn as human beings? Kind of like that people ask the question. But there seems to be a little bit answer here. At least here it seems that people from the heavenly realm are reborn in the human world. So here, I think I should have mentioned it's about Abhasara, self-radiant. So the original place, they had a radiant body, they were happy, and their mind was clear, they were enjoying, and they had a very carefree life. And then they are the beings, they were able to travel in the air, riddhi, like seers. And so they came to this earth and inhabited. So that's the kind of the explanation it's trying to say. But it's a very, very early stage, and it moves to next stage. Now, this is interesting. The gender was not there. And now at that time, all had become one world of water. Now, these are quite interesting to compare. I'm not saying that they are exactly similar or exactly the same thing, say with the science, black hole theories and other scientific theories, but they definitely may have help for scientists. Some if you're a scientist, you may want to consider it like kind of origin of this universe. Basically say become one world of water, dark, and darkness of that makes blind. No moon, no sun appeared, no stars were seen, no constellation, neither night manifest, no days, no distinction. Neither months, no half months, neither years, no seasons. Most importantly, no sexual distinction, no male or female. The beings were reckoned just as beings only, so the distinctions are less. And those beings, sooner or later, after a long time, earth with its savior was spread out in the water. So these now here, earth savior, kind of the sweet stuff on the earth, this is the kind of transformative material. Kind of once they started eating these, all the other things start appearing. So this is kind of the thing that can I say that Marx's idea of materiality comes very close to here. Kind of material things as important, kind of where that's what's happening here. So, and then, of course, this is also related to Marx, but Buddhism says the greed. Greed disposition is a key element with material things and the greed disposition. So the material things working with the mind, that's the kind of the make this change. Some being of greedy disposition said, look, what will this be? And tasted the savory earth with his finger. He thus, tasting, became suffused with savor, and craving entered into him. So, greed, craving. And think about Buddhism. These are the three poisons, yeah? The greed, hate, kind of hatred, yeah, and things like that. So here, the kind of Four Noble Truths, you will say craving, trishna, yeah? And so here you see these negative qualities are associated with this origin of the things. And it goes in the Buddhist explanation. And then it says this, the doing thereof, the self-luminance of those being faded away. When they start eating, their body become ugly and changed. Yeah, and then say that they even later on say that their self-luminance faded away when it happened. The moon and the sun manifested, day and become, and the world evolved again. Of course, millions years. And then it says that also says that their bodies become solid, and then the fifth line say, some were handsome, others were a little bit not handsome. But then the handsome ones were conceited, and they despising others and things like that. So here you see our mana or conceit or pride or comparing with other taken as a problem and the cause of the evolution. Are you with me? Any question to ask?
Yeah, Bhante, thank you for your thoughts. Yeah. I think it's really interesting to listen to you talking about caste, evolutions, and the origins of the universe. But I find that in the study of Buddhism, it's only problematic if you try to diverge from learning morality or spirituality and try to diverge into things like cosmology or things that like even rebirth or karma, which is very hard to see from a scientific point of view. I think the Buddha also mentioned it, I think, from the Aggañña Sutta. Don't believe in everything that people say or from the scriptures and all that. So from this sutta, I think the Buddha tried to talk about the origin of the universe. But I think we try to delve into it too much. And one day I think we find it is against the evidence and the science proof, then it becomes problematic.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, here the Buddha is trying to say that this Brahmin narrative, what they're saying is wrong and is false. It's a construction and it has no basis. And basically saying actually they have forgotten the real facts. So that's what Buddha is trying to say. So that's actually very strong criticism. Very strong criticism. Say you're making up stories. That's what it is. So I'm trying to get around it. So Buddha did not plan here to give the origin of the world, but he gives this narrative to explain to those two guys, Vasit and so on. Actually, this is how it happened in the historical terms. In millions of billions of years, the world, transformed, and as a result, these classes came into being, or vocations came into being. Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
No, I think as you were saying, which I understood from the beginning, is you're trying to do a kind of a textual exegesis.
Yeah.
Today, one text and two more texts to follow. So I think in that context, it was most appropriate to provide a context for this text, not just historical context, but also an ideological context.
Yeah.
In fact, there were two fundamentally different views, the Hindu and the Buddhist, and can also include the Jainas, and which was a historical controversy that went on for almost over thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so, without knowing that, we can't understand the text itself. So I think when one listens to a talk like that, one needs to get into the framework of that text and pose questions which are within the logic of that text and the logic of that, the context. Otherwise, we risk, giving a counter discourse based on our own preferences and prejudices. And no, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying it's a question. So that's basically, what I wanted to say. It's not that there are no other points of view, but then one should go elsewhere and listen to those points of view.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this story, what is interesting is that Buddha usually talks nice things. Buddha usually doesn't say even the worst word that he uses is idiot. That's the word he will use it, and he will not say anything beyond that. Now, but the language that he uses, like yoni, utu, and so on, is quite, I think, can be considered as vulgar and offensive. But also saying, actually, your mouth is something else, kind of like, because so they are Buddha using a lot of humor, kind of almost to the extent of embarrassing the locutors, So that's what I want to get in this textual analysis and say there's a layer of, you can see the Buddha in a different way also in the text, kind of, the way he's characterized in the text is different from other characterization, the language used, and also his observation of empirical factors, So that's the beauty of it. And then also we have this notion of how the world began and how the material. See, like say, Karl Marx is a very influential thinker, whether we like it or not, and Marxism it still contributes, and scholarship all about Marxism, and materiality is the one that we privilege today. And now you see here very clearly the Buddha seeing the materiality as a key factor that transform the individuals and the institutions. And that's what fascinates me. And now there's also the beauty of it. The Marx will think about only the workers and the factories and the production line and the proletariat and so on. He will think about it, but he don't think about the mental factors. It is there, overconsumption and so on, but he doesn't mention. But here the Buddha clearly identifies, it's not only the material things that change our life, but also our disposition, like the greed, craving. And I did not go into later, because of the time then, but maybe next week I will catch up. But then clearly it says that when there were rice there, and you go and pick them up and they grow naturally. But then a lazy fellow think, why should I go in the morning and the afternoon to collect twice? And why don't I go once and collect once? It's like almost like we do. We go to grocery store and bring stuff for the whole week and then pull the freezer and the fridge and everything, yeah? It's like we do. And then it increases. One person went for 2 meals and 2 days, and then it increases to 8 days. One fellow goes and get the rice for 8 days, and then the rice also change. Rice early it was clean rice, and they naturally grows, and then they have husk, and they lumped, and so on. And then when you eat them, your body become darker and your luminous qualities disappear and so on. So here what you see is that not only the material things change the human body, but also the human thinking or ideas about it also impact. So when you have acquisitive qualities like storage, the nature itself furnishes. Of course you don't have to take it, but climate change is a good example. Climate change, earlier maybe 30, 40 years, we, probably did not even believe it. But now you see pouring rain, remember, I think it's Dubai or Dubai, I think, remember the rain, kind of flooded the airplane, the airport and so on. These things you never had encountered in the same tsunami a few years ago, earthquake and so on. So here what you see is this fascinating to see the Buddha is not talking about nirvana or liberation, but Buddhism talking about how the family come into. Sociologists interested in talking about family, the units and so on. Here there is a full exploration of idea of personal property, idea of injustice, how do you resolve and so on. So I think apart from the criticism of the hegemonic narrative, there's a beautiful ideas here, and also this could be a discourse point with materialists today, because most of the scholars in the Western academia are Marxist, and also the scientists also Marxist in some ways because of material impact. But thing is that this mental, our psychology, how our psychology impact the material thing, they have not thinking. But these texts, Buddhist text, talks about not only the importance of materiality, but how our psychology has impact on the materiality. So this kind of mutual influence is the one which give birth to new things. Does it make many sense? Yeah? Okay, and should I continue 10 more minutes? Yeah, also I have...
Just make a follow-up comment to discussing caste.
Yeah. Yeah, it is better.
Names of these two disciples to whom he's preaching, it's very significant because so Bharadwaja is a very high caste Brahmin, and Vasistha, I would guess it means Vasishta. So these are where the royal chaplain Purohitas used to come from, that caste. So they are the two monks, the two would-be monks or disciples, they're coming from the highest Brahmin caste.
Yeah.
So the whole context you gave. So, but what is interesting is, like from what you said at the beginning, it seems that this whole question of the abolition of caste is very much Vidya joining the Sangha. Yeah. That is to say, within the Sangha, there is no caste. Yeah.
Yeah, shouldn't be.
But then there is another issue here. Then this is the talk here is on the sociology and politics. So there is life in the world, life in society, and life out of society. So in a sense, the Sangha is out of this world. I mean, people who have renounced, right? Yeah. People who have renounced, they are out of the world. They are forming their own society based on monastic vows. So there is this ideal of equality, something that is very livable. But what about within society itself? The caste has persevered. Yeah. And if you look at so this is, let's suppose, at the early beginnings of Buddhism and the Buddha is preaching, or just after that. Now, if you look at towards the end of the Buddhist periods, after the 12th century, if you go to Nepal, so caste is very strong among the Buddhist community there. There are Buddhist Brahmins there, Vajracharyas.
Yes.
There are Buddhist Brahmins. They play the same role as the Brahmins play for the Hindu community. And in fact, they also serve the Hindu community as well. And so these were former monasteries. They started getting married, and then the caste comes in again through the back door, as it were. So there is a problem of a kind of ideology and institutions within the world, which was always caste in the sense, in the Indian context. And then outside the world. Because even if you look at the Hindu side, the sannyasi, like the monk on the Buddhist side, is supposed to be casteless. Once you become a sannyasi, you are dead to the world. You perform your funerary rites as if you are a dead man. And then there's no question of caste, whether you are originally a Brahmin or whatever. So it's obviously there are parallels. And on both the Buddhist and Hindu side, they are struggling with the same kind of a social issue, I guess.
Yes.
One coming from one ideology, one coming from the other ideology.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the observation. Very valuable. And the caste actually is a problem for Buddhist society too. Because Buddhist society has not been able to go away from it. And in some circles, still it plays a significant role, which is unhealthy. And actually one of I made a comment about India. It can be made same for Buddhist societies too. The development or enhancing the welfare could be speeded up more if there's no caste distinction. So this persecution on the basis of which family you belong to is detrimental to improving the human conditions, even in Buddhist society. So it's a kind of devastating fact. Yeah. And this, you may be interested in reading the last 2 pages of this text. And it points out the same point that you are mentioning. It says that basically it defined the Brahmins, who is the Brahmin. And then it says that, the Brahmin, there were some Brahmins who went to outside and live in the forest in straw houses, and they start meditating. And like the Buddhist monks, they will come to society during the daytime to collect alms. And then they go back, and they're called Aggañña. That means they are making dhyana, meditators. And then there's other group that, who were living like that. They did not want to meditate, and they came to the city and the villages, and they were concerned about the text and start reciting text. So there's kind of another Brahmin group, Aggañña, like reciters, Vedic reciters and so on. And then there's another explanation, say that any caste, you know, you have a role, like say, if you are Brahmin, you are reciter, and if you are Sastriya, you are warrior, and if you are Vaishya, you are merchant, and if you are Sudra, you are cleaner. But any of these people can renounce their duty. They can stop doing what they are supposed to do, and then they become casteless. So, like becoming Buddhist ascetic. So the Buddha basically says there is the 4 castes here, but then there's a 5th one. They are ascetics. Ascetics who are coming from all 4 previous castes, but they renounce it. They don't fulfill, like Arjuna, for example, you know, in Bhagavad Gita. You know, he is a warrior. He has no choice. He has to do it, yeah? But then Arjuna could have say, oh, I'm not going to do this. It's adharma, you know, I'm not going to kill. He could have done it, but he didn't. You know, things like that. You know, quite interesting. More you read this text, there's a kind of fascinating ideas about who the Brahmin is, and who are the meditators are, and who are the Vedic reciters. And then we did not go into detail about the appointment of kin and so on. But there's a fascinating text. Maybe if you have time, just to Google it and read it and come back, and we will, if it's possible, we will try to catch up. Yeah, and because we went to 9:25, maybe we can close now. No, what do you think? Yeah. So basically, just kind of few words I will summarize so far what I did. Basically, the importance of this discourse is Buddha appears like a rebel in this text. You know, he is humorous, he is empirical, and he uses observable evidence to challenge his counterparts, you know, the hegemonic narrative. And then he provides a redefinition of the Brahmanic narrative. And most important for us, I think, as scholars and people who inquire, is Buddha's ideas of the beginning of the world, social institution, and transformation, and their materiality seen as the foundational. And now the materiality changed human institution and social institution, but in particular, like as you see this conceited, you know, kind of as you can see in this slide on the 5th line, these are the ones that pride, you know, things like that are seen as the elements which kind of speed up things. You know, kind of, because earlier we were radiant and luminous and happy and so on. Gradually we came down because of these negative qualities. That's what is kind of. So the people who are just studying materialism and you know, kind of Marxist view of things, that what matters is production and the material economic success, and that they are just talking about only the material things. But where the Buddha says, actually, yes, they are important, they do things, but they are working in interaction with the humans. You know, human interaction with these material things actually change the human lives. So that's the kind of the foundational thing that we can learn in this text. Yeah. So I wanted to thank Mr. Leslie Jayawardena, here they are, who is the Secretary of Sasana Abhivardhana Society, for inviting me on this occasion. But also we should thank to Mr. Sirisena, who is the President, and also other committee members who are here, and also our Venerable Monk, Venerable Datuk K. Dhamma Thera, who are supporting us and facilitating us, and also the Venerable monks in the temple, and everybody here, the Dayakas, the supporters. And without you, it's not possible to have 30 people here. Yeah, they have put a lot of sweat, you know, to get this thing in. So with this merit, we wish that it will help us to think clearly or differently on the Buddhist text and read make a determination to read this text and try to understand it, and this reflection on Dhamma may help us to bring happiness to our lives and to improve ourselves and to improve our critical abilities, and also to study text neutral way as much as possible, unbiased way, and understand them for our spiritual journey. With that thought, we will conclude and we will transfer our merits to relatives, and may they if they are in a disadvantaged situation, may they accept our merit and make their lives better. Yeah? Okay? Akasatta ca bummatta devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakkantu loka sasanang. Akasatta ca bummatta devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva rakkantu loka sasanang. Akasatta ca bummatta devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakkantu loka sasanang. Sabbitiyo vivajjantu sabbarogo vinassatu mate bhavatvantarayu sukhi digayuko bhava abhivadana sirissa niccang vaddha pachayino chattaro dhammo vaddanti ayuvanno sukhang balang ayurarogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevacha ato nibbana sampatti iminate samijjatu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.